afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for your kind attention during the jury selection process, and I would congratulate you. So many of your neighbors were excused. Each and every one of you impressed 8 very, very experienced lawyers in this courtroom to suggest to us that you will decide this case exactly as you said you would, fairly and impartially, and let the chips fall where they may. I hope you are as anxious to learn about the horrible death of Robert Brooks as I am in the next few minutes to educate you about it. What I say obviously is not evidence. I was not there when it happened, and the evidence will come from that witness stand in a few moments. The day in question was Monday, December the 9th, 2024. This country had just finished a very contentious presidential election. Many of us in our own lives were preparing for the holidays, looking forward to seeing loved ones and spending time with family. And for 43-year-old Robert Brooks, it was the last day of his life. Robert was incarcerated at the Mohawk Correctional Facility, a place right here in Oneida County. He was done with about 90% of a state prison sentence that he had received for stabbing his girlfriend in a drug-induced stupor. I don't have to tell you that. It has nothing to do with the case. These gentlemen didn't know what he was in for. They didn't know anything about him. But I don't want you to speculate, so I told you. Robert was one of about 32,000 adult men and women locked up in the state of New York. Crimes ranging from drug possession to murder and everything in between. And every single one of those inmates, those incarcerated individuals, had one thing in common. Their welfare, their safety, was entrusted to sworn correctional officers who took an oath to do their job, wear a badge, wear a flag on their uniform, and protect those 32,000 people, no matter what they were in for. And among them were those 3 defendants. There are dangerous people locked up in prison. Lord knows I know. I put enough of them there myself. But Robert was reliant on them for protection, for food, for medical care. He was told when to wake, when to sleep, and they killed him. Remember that word, they, because when each of us are subjected to the argument, I didn't do it, I didn't deliver the fatal blow, I didn't lay a glove on him, the other guys did worse, I was just following orders, it doesn't matter, because they killed him. Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kiefer, and Mr. Kingsley, along with several others. They're all charged with depraved mind murder, a carefully orchestrated act, the evidence will show, of sheer unimaginable brutality. The new guy at Marcy, Robert Brooks, met the welcoming committee of these 3 defendants, and in less than an hour, he was dead. Never even unpacked. Never set foot in his cell. Instead, he was in a drawer at the ME's office waiting to be autopsied and for the medical examiner to tell us how he died. It's great to suggest that prisons are dangerous places like we heard on voir dire, how Marcy is so terrible, which would have something to do with the case if Robert ever set foot in Marcy, which he didn't. He only made it to the emergency room. You will witness on tape this depravity firsthand. It will be gut-wrenching. It will be almost beyond belief that these 3 men, sworn to protect Robert Brooks and do their duty, treated him with such depravity. So let's review what happened, what the evidence will show. On the morning of December the 9th, 2024, Robert Brooks was an inmate at the Mohawk Correctional Facility. He had been assaulted by other inmates on 2 occasions, December the 7th and December the 9th. Why? Not going to be able to prove that to you, and it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We're going to put in evidence regarding those assaults simply to show you that they had nothing to do with his death. Rather than deal with whatever was percolating at Mohawk regarding Robert, the officials decided to transfer him to the Marcy Correctional Facility. You'll see a video of Robert that morning while he's at Mohawk. And I want you to pay careful attention to that video, because he's going to be being interviewed by a corrections officer, Sergeant David Sayu. I stand here not to tell you with a broad brush that corrections officers are bad people. On the contrary, the overwhelming majority of them are decent people that do a difficult job, and we owe them our gratitude and our thanks. David Sayu is such a man. Contrast to these 3 defendants, you will see a correction officer doing his duty, treating Robert like a human being, which shouldn't be that hard to grasp. Sayu generally wants to find out what has happened to Robert at Mohawk. It's obvious to him that Robert is having issues, but you'll see with your own eyes, you'll see Robert being compliant, being decent, being respectful. In fact, it gets to a point where Sayu feels comfortable enough with him to remove his handcuffs. Again, our medical proof will show that the assaults that took place at Mohawk had nothing to do with Robert's death. Robert was 5'11". He was a massive behemoth of exactly 148 pounds. In his near decade in state prison, he had a whopping 1 write-up for misconduct. When he left Mohawk that night, everything he had in the world other than his 2 sons was in a couple of duffel bags that he was carrying when he got on that bus. Robert arrives at Marcy Correctional Facility at about 9:07 p.m. 9:07 p.m. And a half hour later, he's dead. He's laying helpless in the emergency room at Marcy Correctional Facility on a gurney. He's got injuries to his head, his neck, his testicles, his liver, his spleen. You'll see a tape of Robert from that evening, and he's looking into a camera that he doesn't know was on and none of these defendants knew was on, and he's pleading for his life. He's begging, someone tell me what I did wrong. Why is this happening to me? And he's also choking and drowning on his own blood. And these 3 defendants, each in their own way, the proof will show, were intimately involved with these acts. They no longer were corrections officers. They were a gang. They took turns, collectively and individually, of punching him, kneeing him, pepper spraying him, choking him, pinning him down, cuffing his legs. The last thing he had to defend himself, his legs. And Mr. Gallagher, you will see, decided to cuff his legs during the beating. Having done this line of work for some time, let me suggest that what's in your mind right now is, surely, Mr. Fitzpatrick, there's more to this. You're leaving something out. He must have spit at the officers. He must have degraded them in some way, insulted their manhood. The truth, the sickening, gut-wrenching truth that you're about to experience is that he didn't do a damn thing. Absolutely nothing. He was greeted by these 3 men and others David Kingsley and Nicholas Kiefer were part of the welcoming committee, along with Glenn Trombley and Robert Kessler, the latter two who you will hear from during this trial, and they were soon to be joined by Matthew Gallagher. Trombley and Kessler will be witnesses. They made deals with the prosecution. Had they not made deals with the prosecution, you would never know about the two assaults that occurred to Robert before he was on camera. You can choose to disbelieve them or not, or believe them. That will be up to you. They are two men that will tell you under oath that they will regret for the rest of their lives the cowardly failure to act that they participated in during the beating of Robert. Someone long ago said, an event has happened upon which it is difficult to speak, but impossible to remain silent. Impossible to remain silent. The words of Edmund Burke from 200 years ago. Even today, they explain the decisions of Trombley and Kessler to testify, reluctant as they may be, ashamed as they may be, and credible as they may be, to speak about something which is impossible to ignore and impossible to remain silent. Defendant Nicholas Kiefer here, he shows up on the scene, part of the welcoming committee. He heroically pepper sprayed Robert for no reason at all. And you'll watch him throughout the rest of these proceedings. He doesn't participate in the beating in the ER. It doesn't matter. He was part of that gang that assaulted Robert. He disoriented him, made him helpless, and allowed the beating to continue to intensify and result in Robert's death. And ladies and gentlemen, he's no Uber driver in this play. Robert is passed off to other members of the gang. You'll see a lot of them that are not in this courtroom for reasons that do not concern you. And then you will see a sickening video of Robert being hogtied and transported into the infirmary like a dead animal. Not because the defendants wanted to get him help or aid, but because that's where they had to take him, the first stop. With utter indifference and depravity, Robert is hogtied and dragged into that ER. Among the individuals doing that is this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Now inside the infirmary, Robert is laid out on a gurney. You'll see video of that. He's already dazed, he's confused. He's clearly been beaten severely before the cameras ever capture his image in that ER. Mr. Kiefer has done his part with his blows, and now a fresh set of corrections officers take over. And remember, they killed him, that gang. You'll see pictures of Mr. Farina and this defendant, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Kingsley with his arms and his hands around Robert's neck, treating him like a doll, while Mr. Farina tries to shove a rag down his throat. He's gagged, he's choked, he's punched, he's yanked by the neck, he's dragged off a gurney by Mr. Kingsley and one of his accomplices by the neck and taken over in the corner for God only knows what purpose. He has no means to defend himself because his hands are cuffed behind his back during this whole process. So what does Mr. Gallagher do? Does he return to the human race and say, enough, stop this now? No, he goes out to his car to get some leg irons. And now we're going to argue to you that he was just following orders to leg iron a man that is moments away from death. Shockingly, after Mr. Gallagher retrieves the leg irons, when you see his body-worn camera, he zips up his jacket. So for 9.5 minutes, we see the inside of Mr. Gallagher's jacket instead of seeing what he was doing. Now, why do you think that happened? You'll know by the time this proof is concluded. Contrary to human experience, apparently it got colder inside and he had to zip up his jacket. Mr. Gallagher had a free will. He had human intelligence. He had training. He saw a man being beaten. He had no obligation, no duty, and God help us all, no human decency to put leg irons on that man. He participated in that death. He aided everyone that was there, and that's what the evidence will show and proved. An ambulance wasn't called for Robert until 9:40 p.m. They rush him to Wynn Hospital. He has no chance. Despite Herculean efforts, he is pronounced dead. Now, many months later, we appear in this courtroom because an indictment has been returned against these three men and others. Mr. Kiefer is charged with offering a false instrument for filing in the first degree. I'm going to make reference to the indictment in reverse order of severity. That's a very fancy way of saying he was required by law to fill out a document, and the man that is going to sit there during this trial, Mr. Kiefer, and say, I didn't break any law. I'm not guilty. I'm presumed innocent. He bald-faced lied in his report. Here's what he said. Prior to entering the emergency room of the infirmary, all force ceased being used against Robert Brooks. That's his story then. You'll see him walking around, looking in, participating, chuckling, hanging with his fellow gang members, while this poor 43-year-old, 148-pound guy is being pummeled like a rag doll a few feet away from him. I will ask you to convict Mr. Kiefer of that count. The defendants, Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer, are charged with gang assault in the second degree. I must and I will prove to you that they had intent to cause physical injury to Robert Brooks. Good Lord, did they intend to cause physical injury? You won't have any doubt of that whatsoever. They were aided by multiple people. They caused serious physical injury to him. Good Lord, they caused his death. And I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty against Mr. Gallagher and Mr. Kiefer for gang assault. The second count charges these three defendants with manslaughter in the first degree, intending to cause injury to the defendant Robert Brooks, serious physical injury, and acting in concert with each other. Sounds complicated at first, but when you boil it down, it's pretty simple. You're going to see massive evidence that this gang, this whole group of these people that stopped being corrections officers the moment Robert got off that bus, that their motive, their operandi was to cause serious physical injury to this man, and they wound up causing his death. And the final count, the most serious count, depraved indifference to human life. Depraved indifference to human life. Nicholas Anzalone, David Kingsley, Anthony Farina, Christopher Walworth, Matthew Gallagher, Nicholas Kiefer. Three of them on trial here today. You won't have any doubt whatsoever that their conduct evinced a depraved indifference to human life. When you watch this video, the first words that pop into your mind are going to be depravity, indifference, recklessness. Difficult to watch, but I'm counting on you to do that. Christopher Walworth, Nicholas Anzalone, Nicholas Kiefer, Mr. Gallagher, Mr. Kingsley. Mr. Brooks was at various times restrained, he was beaten, he was choked, he was strangled, he was gagged, he was forcibly moved and kicked, all with minimal or no resistance on his part, and with absolutely zero legitimate law enforcement purpose. These assaults were perpetrated while the defendants were acting in concert with each other. With depraved indifference, they did nothing to restrain each other, did nothing to stop the beatings, and failed to immediately order medical assistance. The indictment alleges, and the medical examiner will so testify, that Mr. Brooks suffered injuries to his head, to his neck, severe injuries to his neck, his hyoid bone, his thyroid cartilage, his torso, his liver, his spleen, his testicles, each and every blow contributing to his death as it put added strain on his heart, as his body gasped and choked for blood because he couldn't breathe because of the blood rushing into his airways. Blood as a result of the beatings these three defendants and their fellow gang members inflicted upon him. If I'm able to get it into evidence, and I hope I will, you will see Department of Corrections and Community Supervision's rules and guidelines regarding an individual corrections officer's duty to intervene. Duty to intervene. It is not complicated. When you see what you will see with your own eyes, and you realize that these three men did nothing to intervene, I ask you, just please follow your oaths. Follow your oaths and follow the facts in this case. I will show you all three of these defendants have signed acknowledgments within a year of this homicide, that they all acknowledged being trained in that area and understood what their duties were. And they don't get to change that because it's October of 2025. You'll see the signed form by David Kingsley. You'll see a signed form by Matthew Gallagher. You'll see a signed form by Nicholas Kiefer. You're not supposed to help and stand by while others beat an inmate to death. It really ain't that complicated. You'll see, as I already alluded to, Mr. Kiefer's use of force report, which is a total fabrication. It's complete nonsense. You'll see a use of force memo by Mr. Kingsley. Again, glaring by its omissions. If you read the use of force memo, you'd think that Robert tripped on a piece of ice on his way into the infirmary. Now, how can I tell you with such certainty that I will prove all of these things to you? Because my most important witness in this case, ladies and gentlemen, there's four of them. They're body-worn cameras, about the size, a little bigger than a pack of cigarettes. All three of these defendants are supposed to wear them and supposed to activate them every time there's an encounter. Not only did they not activate them, Mr. Gallagher went so far as to cover his up as he zipped up his jacket. You know how many of these defendants activated their cameras? Zero. Not one. 9:26, when Mr. Brooks is a danger to absolutely no one, Mr. Gallagher, at Sergeant Trombley's direction, goes out to retrieve leg irons, and then at exactly 9:26 and 33 seconds, he zips up his jacket. The evidence is going to show that the rest of these defendants were unaware that video was being made. Can you imagine what this trial would be like if I didn't have those videos? Can you imagine what their stories would be? We already know what Mr. Kiefer's story is. Nothing happened after he entered the emergency room. You'll see that that's completely fallacious. If I didn't have these tapes, I'd be listening to stories about, oh, it was icy out. He was resisting arrest. We bravely had to defend ourselves, and we were barely able to restrain him because he was in a psychotic rage from some drug. But they didn't know that each of these 4 body-worn cameras from 4 separate corrections officers were storing data that the New York State Police were able to recover. And you'll hear about that, and you'll see these tapes in all their depravity. I won't have to say much as I show those videos to you. I won't have to. Because if you're the people I think you are, you'll know exactly what happened. There's no audio, and you will have ample time during the course of this trial to familiarize yourself exactly who is who on that tape. You won't get it the first time, trust me. It's difficult sometimes. You'll be able to tell Robert Brooks because he's the one bleeding and dying. You'll see a composite of all of those tapes together. And then when I finish presenting that tape to you, remind yourself that these 3 defendants are sitting here telling you, we broke no laws. You know, I go to Disney World a lot. My favorite ride is Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm not ashamed to admit that, but as you walk in, if any of you have ever been there, there's this baritone voice that says, "Dead men tell no tales." That's not true. It's Robert Brooks in death is going to tell you what caused his death. We're going to present to you Dr. Katya Merkulova, and she is going to describe to you in excruciating detail the injuries that Robert suffered, the number of injuries that he suffered, the lethality of the force used, how each one of these blows, as I mentioned earlier, put strain on his failing heart. She'll tell you that Robert had a synthetic drug in his system, and she will very, very clearly tell you how that had absolutely nothing to do with his death or with his conduct. In fact, the only thing it had to do with it is probably ameliorated some of the pain that he was suffering. These defendants took Robert's life, these 3 and others, with such callousness and such brutality that it will probably take her close to an hour just to describe to you each and every wound that he suffered. Wounds to the right side of his head, his neck, his torso, his groin, all while these defendants were smiling, joking, checking the time, pepper spraying him, cuffing his legs, telling the nurses, "Don't come in the room, nothing to see here," until it was way too late to save Robert. For the depravity, the indifference, the gross recklessness, the utter lack of urgency, you can look at a room full of people that look like they have about as much care as they do as to whether or not it's going to rain a month from now. They're just going about what they do. And I'll ask you to convict Mr. Kingsley because of the gross abuse that he, and you will see it, inflicted on Robert's neck, the beatings that he participated in. I'll ask you to convict Mr. Gallagher, who made it easier for these people to inflict this pain, who tried to prevent you from seeing what he was doing, who restrained this guy's legs, and he's going to tell you that it was part of his training? Where do you see Robert lying on that gurney, and you tell me what world an individual lives in to say that's part of my training? And Nicholas Kiefer, the brave pepper sprayer who had no idea what was going on, just rushed into a scene and joined in the beating. They murdered Robert. They murdered him with a depraved indifference to human life. I wish each and every one of you Godspeed over the next couple of days, and I can't imagine a better place for justice to be than this courtroom with you good people. And I thank you for your kind attention.